Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video we're going to continue looking at the series Native America by PBS. So First Peoples, Ancient Civilizations, and Enduring Cultures. So this is a 4-part series. This I got from my library. It has all 4 discs in there. The second episode that we're going to be covering today is Nature to Nations. So this is an interesting video here. So it's about 56 minutes long, so it's about an hour. And each one of these focuses, tethers itself to a specific place. In the previous video, which was Caves to Cosmos, it was this isolated former massive city in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. In this case, we're looking at upstate New York. Specifically, we're looking at what we call the Iroquois nations. So this was America's first democracy. And they're talking about their wampum belts, which was something that they used to, made out of these wampum beads, which are very difficult to make. They come out of the quahog shell. It's a type of mollusk, found in New England. And yes, that's what it is. It's a quahog. So they're very difficult to make. The specific wampum belt they talk about a lot had been in the custody of the state of New York for a very long time, and they fought to get it back, and they finally got it back. Because again, it was one of those, this is stolen grave goods, you took this from us, give us back. You know, kind of like their land that we stole from them. And kind of like the idea of our democracy that we stole from them, yes. So basically the story with what we call now the Iroquois Nation, is 5 tribes that were what's now upstate New York were constantly fighting. Bloody warfare. And in their legends, basically a peacemaker came and basically says, you cannot keep doing this. And he joined together with a woman who was constantly feeding all the basically injured soldiers, no matter what. And he's like, you've got to help me end this. So they came together in a longhouse, the 5 members of leaders of these tribes, and they chose to make peace. They made a constitution. Yes, this is where we got the idea. They talked to Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Noticeably, Jefferson was not at the framing of the Constitution, but he was at the Articles of Confederacy, creating that. It's a different story. That's American history here. But the idea for the democracy and a lot of the coming together and the wording, in many ways, came from this Iroquois nation, which we then decided to devastate. Because, of course, white people do this. That's what they do. And steal their land, and that's what their people, and they still have reservations there, but we've kind of destroyed their river. Because it's disgusting. And by we, I mean the white people. My family may or may not have anything to do with this thing. As far as I know, my origins come from mother's side. Yes, they're English. They were probably around here, maybe. Father's side, at least my maiden name, yes. Parts of it, no. They came over later. But never left. That's my own history. Moving on. So that's where this is anchored, this specific video. They also talk to a specific group in the Pacific Northwest. In this case, it would be First Nations people rather than Native Americans, because they're in Vancouver, Canada. So in the United States, they're called Native Americans. In Canada, they're called the First Nation people. I don't know what the heck they're called in Mexico. They're intermingled so much. So they may go by specific tribal names. Not a clue. But in the ruled by Anglo-Saxons, in this case the English and the French, and occasionally the Spanish, but not so much. Depends on where you are. They are called Native Americans in the United States, and then the First Nations in Canada. No, neither one treats them that well. Canada may or may not treat them worse. It's up for debate. But nonetheless, you have this young man who's being brought into as a chief. He's replacing his grandfather, who's either passed on or retiring. very, very possible he could just be retiring. Like passing on this, and how the cedar tree is very important to their culture, and how it's important for them to pass on their tales, their history, their culture, which is the other thing that's going on in New York. They're talking about creating these wampum belts. They're trying to pass on their culture to the next generation so it doesn't get lost. And so they continue these traditions. And that's the big thing here. You're talking about how these native people had societies, complex societies. They also talk about some of the other native people around the Iroquois Nation, how they create these wampum beads. But specifically, they start talking about corn. In this case, this trifecta of squash, beans, and corn grown together in one field, and how they support each other. And that's the other thing they're talking about. They talk about the totem poles and the wampum belts and these three food trifectas, how they, on their own, they're weak. Together, they're strong. So if you look at the totem pole, all of these individual parts are supporting the entire thing. So the low man, they talk about how the low man on the totem pole doesn't make sense to them because that's the strongest. That's the one that's holding everybody else up. So it makes no sense to them, and it has nothing to do with their culture anyway. So, and then you have these three, the beans, the corn, and the squash grown together, protect each other. The squash protects the plants. It's low growing, and spiny leaves protects the other two plants from the insects, and the corn reaches up and replenishes the earth, while the beans use it as a stalk, and then they deplete, I believe it's nitrogen. It could be the other way around. But these three things, when eaten together, are very healthy. And so they're bringing back the growing of them all together. It's not what you consider rotating crops, where you grow one and then stop and then grow the other. No, they're growing them all together all at once, and they harvest them. So that's the other thing they talk about. They also talk about, you go back to the Aztec and the Maya, corn was the lifeblood of these cultures. And this was, they developed this over time. I mean, this was a small weed that they cultivated and changed through selection, similar to breeding dogs, to create a crop that feeds half the planet. And they do this with a lot of things: beans, squash, potatoes, tomatoes, corn. All of these things come from the Americas. This is part of, along with, of course, chili peppers. They're part of what we call the Columbian Exchange when you're talking food history. So all of these things originate in North and South Central America. So that's where these things came from. The native people created these things. Potatoes are another big one. Though I don't remember if they talk about Peru. I'm going to admit this. I fell asleep near the end of this. I'm watching these at night after I shoot these videos. I will be watching part 3. So I've been curled up in my husband's papasan, and I have fallen asleep because I have a toddler. And it's like 8 o'clock at night. So it is a very, very good video. It does talk about how these cultures were brought up, how they are preserving their histories and their people, and being connected to the earth, which is always something that strikes me and really makes me think of how I wish we were more. We return to our roots. Even me, as for better word, I'm an Anglo-Saxon and a Nordic. German, Swedish, British, somewhere in there. British Isles. Probably not Irish, but somewhere in there. Along with, of course, the German and the Swedish, which I know directly because Ellis Island. So, at one point in time, all these cultures were rooted in the earth and growing things and hunting. And we very much separated ourselves, particularly in the United States, have separated ourselves from our culture. And this is one of the things that always makes me think when I watch these videos, particularly as, again, an Anglo-Saxon. the Christians in the deep past came in and wiped out a lot of the Nordic cultures, a lot of the cultures of Britain. That includes, yes, the Romans helped there too. And they wiped out these tales, these cultures. Ireland preserved some of it, and it's here and there, but most of it we don't know because it was word of mouth, and it was the stories, and the culture was swept clean in many places. You can find bits and pieces, but we don't have that connection, that traditional connection to our ancestors in that deep past because of the long range of Christianity that's been through Europe for a very, very, very long time, particularly Northwest Europe and the Nordic countries. And then, of course, you have the added to, we came to America and made everything anew. So we're really disconnected from our original ancestors in the Anglo-Saxon sense. So to learn about this stuff is very important to me, because as much as the Native Americans have had a lot of their culture destroyed, some of it is still there. They weren't completely wiped out. They managed to hold on because they were in their own world in many places, even though they were moved and their reservations and all of this was absolutely horrible, and it still is. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The way the First Nations people and the Native Americans have been treated and still are is a bloody mess. But in many ways, they still have their community, and they're still holding out on, and they're fighting back. They're fighting to keep it, which is important. Very important to keep it, to spread this knowledge, to spread this history, to respect it. And that's really what this video is talking about. It's the continuation, the importance of the continuation of the culture and the traditions, and getting back to and connecting to their ancestors, and connecting to these traditional ways that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And that's important. And I fully agree that this is extremely important. And it's important to spread the knowledge and to spread the stories and the traditions so they are part of history. As I said in my previous video on this, one of the reasons I think this series is important is because this is a vital part of human history that we have a tendency, particularly in the United States, to ignore and forget that these Native American cultures were, particularly in the North, when they were not nomadic, were stable, and these weren't nomadic. They had homes, they had permanent villages and buildings and structures, and prior to that they had histories of massive stone structures. The previous video they were talking about Chaco, which was a giant stone city that was practically the size of Manhattan, that was almost slightly older than the pyramids. Cat shaking here, hopefully that was messed up the video. But yes, there's a cat in my lap. There usually is these days. So again, it's a very, very good video. It very much talks about this history. It does talk a little bit more about what's going on in, again, South and Central America, specifically Brazil and Mexico, where you have these huge civilizations that the Spanish wiped out with disease and, being the Spanish. And again, the horrible proof being that Columbus was. Yeah. Not going there. That's another video, oddly enough, I believe, in this series. We talk a little bit about how horrible human being Columbus was. Maybe one day we'll explore that further. Interesting part of history. But nonetheless, that's what this is. And it's talking about these cultures and how they were built on corn and these wampum belts and this democracy that they created and these symbols that the founding fathers took, with the only difference is they don't respect, of course, white people don't respect the land, which of course the Native Americans do. They give back. They respect it. They know that their job is to take care of it, not rule it and, make a mess and destroy it and conquer it, as unfortunately is some of the more traditional Christian view in many ways of we are superior to all other creatures rather than part of it, and is very, very common in capitalist and modern industrial nations where we're very much removed from the earth and nature. And I'm one of those people who really thrives off being out in nature to an extent, though of course I like my modern luxuries like plumbing. Big on plumbing and sleeping indoors away from bugs. But I do like being outside. I like to go hiking. I like hanging out in my backyard periodically. I like being barefoot in the grass most of the time, as long as it's safe. But I do draw energy from being outside, which is hard to do where we live, because this is May when I'm shooting this. I'll be November. Finally, it'll be November again when you guys see this. But during the summer months, it's nearly impossible to spend time outside because it's just too bloody damn hot. So kind of like people in the north, it's freezing outside. You can't really spend that much time outside in the winter, and it's dark. We just have it's blazing hot, and it's just sun. But nonetheless, that is the end of this video. Nature to Nations, this is part 2. Be sure to check out part 1, which is Caves to Cosmos. And then I think there are 2 more that I will be covering. I'm going to be watching another one tonight. So just so you have a reference of when I'm filming things, this is March 18th of 2022. So you guys will see this in November. So along with this, please check out the rest of the channel. I do a bunch of other stuff. I'm covering Joseph Barak. I'm always mispronouncing his name. Some of his books. He's a well-known Native American author. I did some of his books last year. I did some more other Native American stuff concerning the Museum of the American Indian last year. So you can check those out. I will be covering Native American stuff every November because it's the time to celebrate, and it's good enough. Good enough. Just good enough time to do this, kind of following some of the school schedules. We are secular homeschoolers, so I do a lot of book reviews and film reviews. Some of it's fun, some of it's educational like this. Some of it's book series. I have quite a few book series, particularly coming up next year in 2023. I'm covering The Princess Diaries. I'm covering More Tamora Pierce. I've covered her Circle of Magic quartets, both of them, as well as The Will of Empress, if you can check those out. The Song of the Linus Quartet and the Immortals Quartet are coming. I'm also covering the Guardians of Ga'Hoole later next year, so that's moving in. A lot of those videos have already been shot because I own a lot of those books, or the Guardians of Ga'Hoole. I've been working from the library. So be sure to check out the channel. I've done a variety of other series. I've done what's going on right now. If you want to check out something really dark, I'm doing the Last Apprentice series, should be running right now. As of right now, I have like a short story collection and one more thing to do from them, and then that is done. If you want to know the truth, that's the reason I did the Princess Diaries, because The Last Apprentice is really, really, really horror and really, really dark. I needed fluff. I needed fluff badly. So you got the Princess Diaries. So that's coming up next year, along with a variety of other things. So again, like and subscribe. Besides the book reviews, one more thing, I do some travel stuff. By the time you guys see this, I'll have at least maybe 4 videos up travel-wise. Hopefully more, we'll see. Along with some homeschooling stuff. So we're secular homeschoolings. I just have a toddler right now. She'll be 3 by the time you guys see this. So we'll be bringing more in the educational stuff as that goes along. So again, like and subscribe. Leave a positive comment if you have one. Thank you.